Welcome to the Blue Heart Podcast. I'm your host and conversational guide, Lieutenant Joe Pangaro. This podcast is for you, the men and women of law enforcement, because ours is a noble profession, worthy of your heart, your passion, and your life. Now, let's get to the heart of the matter. Hello, officers. Lieutenant Joe Pangaro here. And today we're going to talk about a situation you might find yourself in. Now, a lot of the times, the examples that I give in our podcast here, our time together, are based on you being a lone individual. You're a lone officer having to take some action, and then we need to think about these things. When there's more than one of us, sometimes that's a much better situation for us. You know, there's strength in numbers. We can rethink things. We can work together to really make sure we're safe to do the right things. So I concentrate a lot on what do we do when we're by ourselves, right? Because we want to be safe. We want to do the right things. We want to accomplish our goals, but we want to do it safely. So what I want to talk about a little bit now is managing a disturbance scene. Okay, a disturbance scene. You come upon a situation or you're taking some action and we see a disturbance start to take place. You know, what are we going to do? Do we have to be in the scene? Would it be wise for us to leave that scene? Would it be unsafe for us to leave that scene? Are there victims there that need us to stay? What do we do? So I guess one of the best ways to describe this, let me give you an example of a situation that happened to me. My partner and I, we work in a plainclothes unit, and we were at our mall, this big giant shopping mall. And it was actually Valentine's. Was it the night before Valentine's? It was the night before Valentine's. And the mall was packed with people. I mean, people were everywhere. And we were having at that time a situation where there was some gang members had been using the mall as a drop-off point for drugs. People would come to the mall because they knew it. They knew where it was. They could get there, and they would pick up their drugs. A lot of drug transactions. So we were working the area. Our narcotics unit was working the area pretty heavily. And on this date, my partner Kevin and I, we went into the mall to just see what's going on because we had some robberies at the stores. And when it's really packed like that with lots of people, you can have difficulties, especially when there's an element of crime taking place somewhere regularly. We all have these high crime areas, don't we? Even in small towns, there's an area where things always happen. Well, for us, it was the mall, either the parking lot, car burglaries, robberies in the parking lot, or stores were being robbed, people were selling drugs, all kinds of stuff going on. And it was a nice mall. It was a shame, but it had really been taken over by a criminal element. So my partner Kevin and I are in the mall, and we're walking around, and like I said, it was packed, and we're watching people, and we see a guy that we just something about the guy seemed a little bit off. He seemed really nervous, like he was waiting. He's standing there looking around, and he was approached by another guy. They sat down on a bench, and they were looking very secretive, like they were trying, instead of just being calm and relaxed, they were drawing attention to themselves by their nervousness. And we saw one guy hand off a package to another guy, and it was obviously a hand-to-hand drug kind of a thing. Well, and you got to understand this. This is how packed the mall were. We wouldn't want to be on top of them, so we were a distance away, so we could see them. And when they got done with their transaction, they got up and they both went different directions. And now we had to make a choice. Which person are we going to go after? The guy that sold and has the money, or to go after the guy that has the drugs? So we decided to pursue the guy that had the drugs, right? We'll get the drugs, and then maybe we can flip him into an informant. Who's the guy you bought from? Let's order up again, get him right back here again, and we'll take him off, that time. So as we're trying to make our way, this guy is looks like he's heading for an exit. And we are trying to catch up behind him without looking like we're chasing him. We're just doing our thing, moseying along. We didn't take our radios out yet to tell headquarters because everybody there would know them we're a cop, and that could start a problem. So we waited till we got outside, and he was ahead of us, 30 yards maybe, and he's walking to his car. He's going kind of quick. So we're saying, okay, let's see where he gets to his car. This is going to be easy, right? One guy, he's going to hop in the car, and we're going to stop him, and we'll detain him right there and do our investigation. So we're following out. We see him hop in a car, and he gets in a car, and there's a young lady in the car. She's sitting in the front passenger seat. So we walk up to the car, and as funny as this might sound, these kind of things happen, all the time in police work. He had taken the bag of drugs out of his pocket, and he kind of, unrolled it to show her. And it was a big bag of cocaine. It was probably I don't know, a little more than, when we weighed it out, it was just under an ounce of cocaine. And he's showing it to her in the car, very exciting. Well, we walk up on the sides of him. He hadn't started the car yet. And knock on the window. I believe I knocked on the window. My partner was on the other side watching the young female to make sure there was no weapons involved. We had flashlights. We lit them up. Our badge is out. Hey, police, step out of the car. Well, the guy drops the bag on the floor of the car. Obviously, he's nervous. He got caught, and he knew it. So we get him out of the car, and I put his hands up on the car. I'm patting him down. We're going to handcuff him, all that kind of thing. So cuff, then search, right? Remember that. Cuff, then search. That's one of our safety rules. If you're going to make the arrest, cuff him and then search him. So I cuffed the guy up, holding him by the handcuffs, and my partner's getting the young lady out of the car, and he's handcuffing her. And at that point, the parking lot had a lot of people in it. And some people that knew this young man start saying, hey, what the hell are you doing? What are you doing to him? Why are you arresting him? What are you doing? And the crowd starts to gather. And when I say the crowd gathered, I mean it gathered quickly. People hear this yelling and screaming. All of a sudden, people are coming from their cars. Now they see two cops and these two people under arrest. And they're starting to move towards us. At that point, we got on the radio. Headquarters, we have two under arrest. We have narcotics. We have a crowd gathering. Please send me some additional cars immediately. Well, in a matter of probably a minute that we stood at that car, we had to make a decision. There had to be 30 or 40 people moving in on us, screaming and hollering. More people were coming, and we had to make a decision. And the young man that we were arresting, he was actually pretty good. He says, he looks at me and he goes, I think they're going to beat your ass. And I said, I think you're right. So I reached into the car, I grabbed the dope, and Kevin and I made a decision. The crowd was behind us, right? That's where they were building. We said, let's start moving through the parking lot here. Let's get some distance between us and the crowd, because it was becoming hostile. And he was probably right, this kid. Probably some people were going to attack us. So we started moving through the rows of cars while we're getting on the radio again. Headquarters, you got to step that up. We need people here now, because now the crowd is following us. We got these two people in handcuffs. Our car was not anywhere near there. That's not where we had parked. We followed him to his vehicle. And we can hear the sirens coming. And we just kept moving, and the crowd was moving and moving and moving. And we just kept walking these people until the first couple of patrol cars pulled in. We loaded them in the car. The officers took them away. Next car came and took us back to our car. So these kind of scenes can develop anywhere. We had to make a tactical decision. Could we have turned around and tried to disperse the crowd? You're going to disperse 40 people that in today's world don't care that you're the cops. Back in the day, you could give verbal commands to people to back up, back away, and they actually would. Does that happen today? No. And you have to remember mob mentality. When a group of people get together, any group of people get together, and they're of like mind, they act. The mob has its own thinking. People that would normally never do anything criminal, like attack a police officer, may very well do that in a crowd if that's the energy of the crowd. They could throw bottles. They could do all kinds of things. And then it's just the two people there, in this instance, just my partner and I with the two people we arrested. We were also responsible for protecting them, right? We had to protect these people under arrest. So our decision was, hey, let's move away from the crowd as best as we can. Help is coming. We didn't have a vehicle to jump into, so let's keep moving. We kept moving. We monitored the crowd, and we got ourselves to a position of safety. But when you think about what you do today, monitoring a crowd, being in the middle of a crowd like that. Say you get called to a call. You get sent to a call that something happened and there's a crowd of people and they're upset with what happened. And I'll give you an example in a minute. But if you think about the things that can happen, let's think about the George Floyd case for a minute. Now, regardless of what you think, positive or negative, about George Floyd, the reality is he should not have died in that confrontation. Now, I'll tell you right off the bat, we don't know the full circumstances. We know he had fentanyl in his body. We know he had a lot of stuff in his body. But that officer kneeling on his neck like that was not the cause of his death. But it was not necessary either, right? I get the idea. You put people down, and a lot of our training would tell us that if you control the head, control the neck, you could control the body. And that's why we do those things. We don't do that to kill people. right? And in this case, the coroner said that was not the cause of death, right? But he ended up dying. He had drugs in the system, and maybe that killed him. Maybe that was it. But the fact is, it was not right to kneel on him for 9 minutes like that. They could have done other things with him. So I don't want to. My purpose here is not to rehash that case, other than to say to you, think about what you're doing. Now, the reason that the officers were there, they were waiting for backup to come for whatever they were calling for, and a crowd was gathering, right? The crowd was gathering, screaming at them, starting to do. And how did they manage the crowd? They didn't manage it very well. You know, the thing to do would have been to get that guy up, get Mr. Floyd up off the ground, put him in a police car, whether he wanted to go in or not, pull him into the back of the car and get out of there. The crowd was building, and he may or may not have died from the drugs. I don't know. But the reality is, you wouldn't have kneeled on his neck for 9 months and found yourself in prison because it looked horrible. It did not look professional, and it ended up being a contributing factor to the man's death. And we don't want to be the contributing factor to anybody's death, right? So, but the crowd moving in was important, right? That was probably distracting the officers. They weren't paying attention. There's a lot that went on in that scene that we don't know. We weren't there. We only saw and heard about the trial. So again, my point here is not to make a case one way or another in the George Floyd death, other than to say that seemed pretty bad to kneel on somebody for 9 minutes. You could have taken other actions. But I think they were paralyzed by the crowd, and that's the point of our managing a disturbance talk we're having here. All right? Another incident, very important, and this is where I'm going to ask you some questions. There was an incident in Brooklyn where a driver of a car struck a small child who was on a bicycle and injured the child very, very badly. Well, the driver got out of the car to check on it, and a crowd surrounded the man, and they were starting to attack him. Say you're the officer sent to that scene, or you come upon that scene. You have a couple of things. What is your first priority at that scene would be the question. What's your first priority when you get there? Is it the little child? Is it crowd management? Is it the man being attacked? Right? We would all think it's the little child. Do what we can to help that little child. But can you do that with a crowd gathering around you, maybe throwing bottles, maybe attacking people? What happens if they're beating up that driver? What can you do? And you're the lone car there. Maybe you have one backup car with you. You want to consider ahead of time, what could we possibly do? You want to talk to your supervisors. Hey, listen, Sarge, Lieutenant, Captain, whoever's running your briefings, what would you suggest we do? Talk amongst yourselves to come up with some scenarios, kind of like table topping. So that's why I asked this question. What is your first priority at that scene when you get there? Child's been injured, the driver that hit him is being attacked, and the crowd is gathering, and they don't like you either. So what are we going to do? What do you do if the parent wants to take that injured child to the hospital themselves? They're going to pull the child off the bicycle. They're going to put him in their own car and take him to the hospital. You're going to let them do that? Would that be a wise thing to do while you're trying to manage this crowd? Do you give the crowd orders? All right. What if they refuse to follow your orders? Would you choose to leave the area if you were in danger, or would you press forward? If additional officers could not get to you, what would you do? Would you be able to do some things? So I'm not saying that there's answers to every one of these questions. We all know that they're fluid. I'm saying we need to think about things before we find ourselves in this position. How could you manage this crowd? In the example I gave you for me and my partner, Kevin, would you have done the same thing? What would you have done as that crowd started to move in to protect your people under arrest, protect yourself? How would you have gotten out of that situation? Right? Look at your policy, if you have any policy that talks about crowd control issues, personal safety, rendering first aid. This is the kind of discussions we need to have every day when we're in briefings. Right? When we do in-service, we need to think about these kind of things to help us make the right decisions out in the road. So what's your first priority? Could you get control of that scene? Have you been trained in that kind of a thing? How many officers do you think would be coming to help you? What would you do if the parent wanted to take the child? Would you be able to stop them? And what if you do if the crowd moves in on you, is attacking the other driver? What are you going to do? All right? So these are all important things to consider. And the concept here is to get us to understand how you might handle a situation where a crowd begins to gather and may get violent. Because this happens to us more and more and more now as we do our jobs out in the street of the towns and cities that we patrol and take care of. So I want to make sure everybody had to take a minute to think about that and try and figure out what you could do. Because one of the things I tell you all the time, and it'll be like a mantra as you listen to me over these times, the first time we do something, we do not want that to be the first time we've thought about it. Right? You need to think about these things in advance. What equipment do you have that can help you? What options could you have? How could you do these kind of things if you found yourself in that situation? All right, so be careful out there. Talk about this and be safe. Lieutenant Joe and the Blue Heart Podcast Network would like to thank our sponsors. Blue 360 Media. You can find them at www.blue360media.com. And Medical Essential Diagnostics. You can find them at www.med-nj.com. We would also like to thank the Blue Heart Network production team, led by Senior Executive Director Todd Pangaro. Be careful out there. Do what's right.